Thank you, everybody, for coming to the Aaron Torres Podcast YouTube page. If you could do me a quick favor, see that little subscribe button at the bottom of your screen? Go ahead, click that subscribe button. Really does help our channel grow, our audience grow, and I really do appreciate it more than you know. So click that subscribe button. Appreciate your support. Now, here's the video that you came here for. This one's an interesting one, and I feel bad because it feels like every time I talk about Florida football, feels like I'm kind of making fun of them, okay? But I saw this headline on Tuesday morning, and I think it's at least worth discussing. The headline is from the Orlando Sentinel, and it basically implies that Florida football, they're having trouble raising money for NIL. The headline from the Orlando Sentinel, Florida victorious seeks more wins, more dollars, and donors for the Florida Gators. So, let me just say this. When you go into year 3 of a regime and you have the biggest paper of record that covers you talking about how you got no NIL money, that ain't good. And I thought there were a couple quotes in the article that kind of caught my attention, okay? The first one, this is from Florida Victorious CEO. By the way, Florida Victorious is the collective that runs things. He said, "We cannot guarantee that if we have NIL, we will win a championship. I can pretty much guarantee that if we don't have NIL, we will not." I think that's 100% accurate. But what I also thought was interesting was this quote. Florida's 11-14 record in 2 seasons under Billy Napier has created fundraising headwinds. To turn around the Gators' fortunes will require more NIL support from the fan base. And so I think, listen, when I saw this headline, it was actually tweeted from a Miami Twitter account, like a University of Miami Twitter account, a rival of the Gators. And it was basically the typical, oh, Florida's broke. They got no money, poverty program, whatever. But at the end of the day, I actually think that little snippet in that article is the important part. Florida isn't necessarily having trouble raising NIL money. They're having trouble raising NIL money for Billy Napier. And that to me is much more interesting, and I want to dive in. And like I said, I feel bad that I'm always criticizing and picking on Billy Napier, but bluntly, the guy makes it kind of easy. 11-12 through 2 seasons. I believe it's the first back-to-back losing season since like the 1960s or the 1930s. It's been like 50 plus years, okay? And by the way, this is happening in the NIL transfer portal era. It has never been easier to get talent onto your roster, and yet Florida is coming off its worst 2-game stretch in 50 to 60 years. Now, some of it's on Dan Mullen, didn't leave the cupboard full, but some of it's on Billy Napier as well. But beyond that, and I keep talking about this, it's not just that Florida loses under Billy Napier. It's that they routinely get embarrassed. Like they lose in the most embarrassing ways possible, okay? This year, you lose to LSU when Jaden Daniels basically clinches the Heisman Trophy. He has 600 yards of total offense by himself. You lose to Kentucky when Ray Davis has 280 yards rushing and becomes a brief Heisman Trophy contender in his own right. You lose to Florida State at home when they have a third-string quarterback in. You lose to Utah when they have a backup quarterback. You get pounded by Utah. They were not only missing their backup quarterback, or they were playing a backup quarterback. They were missing like all of their key players. And so it makes me laugh when you see the headline, they're having trouble raising money. They're having trouble raising money because it's a mediocre product. And what did I just talk about with UCLA? It doesn't matter what the fan base is. They have to believe what they are giving to, or they're not going to give to it. Just like if you are using your own personal money on whatever, you have to believe in what you're giving to. If you're giving to a charity, if you're giving to a dog rescue charity, and every time you go in there, the dogs look sicker and the dogs aren't getting adopted, and I don't know, there's fleas everywhere, like God forbid, because I'm a dog person. But like, if that's you would stop giving your money, or you would say, where is the money going to? And so I think that's essentially what Florida fans are doing. They're saying, we have money. We're just not giving it to this mediocre product. Now, what I think is more interesting in the bigger picture, and this is something I talked about on this show like 2 years ago. And as usual, Torres was way ahead of schedule on this, and you got to listen closely because I tell you stuff's going to happen. But when NIL came in, I thought to myself, I said, you know, the quickest way to get rid of a coach that you don't want? You just dry up those resources. And in the NIL portal world, that's all it is. The resources are, do we have money to pay our players? And I remember thinking this 2 years ago, really at the advent of NIL. Two things happened that struck me. One, it was during Coach O's last year at LSU when things were clearly going bad and like he was going back and forth with fans and it was ugly and it was this and it was that. And I was like, he ain't going to be able to recruit because they ain't going to give him any money to help him land the players that he needs. I was also thinking about it from the inverse when the Tennessee Nico Imamalieva story came out about, 6 months after that. Remember, Nico signed that huge NIL deal. We didn't know it was officially him, but we knew it was officially him. I just bring it up because when Nico signed that contract, I remember thinking, coming off an 8-win year, much better than the year before, improving. They have a coach that they like. But imagine trying to ask those boosters for that same money if you're coming off back-to-back losing seasons. And it's ironic because if you believe NIL is the only factor in all this, then at the times when you need the most money is the times when you're not going to get it. You're going to get it early in your regime when you say, this is what we need, this is what we have to do, this is what we have to this is what we have to that. And when you need it is when you actually are losing and you need to save your butt to get good players. The problem is nobody's going to donate when you're losing. And it's funny because I actually had a former head coach reach out to me when I tweeted out that article. And they said, when is the NIL funds going to dry up? One, I do think we're getting closer to a world where college athletes are collectively bargained employees. So it's going to be less of an issue. But what I will also say, I don't think it's going to dry up because I think what's going to happen is, I don't think the bubble is going to burst. Maybe that's a better way to put it. Because what's going to happen is, if your coach stinks, you're going to hire a new coach, and that coach is going to convince you this is what we got to do. This is the money that we need. And you're going to give because you want to believe in your program. Problem at Florida is fans do not believe in Billy Napier. They do not believe in his vision. They certainly do not believe in his product. And so it's hard for me to sit there and say, like, I'm totally surprised that they're having trouble raising money. Know who's not having trouble raising money right now? Florida State, because they were awesome last year despite how the season ended. You know who's not having trouble raising money right now? Texas. By the way, you know who's not having trouble raising money right now? Texas A&M. New coach, want to believe, want to get things right. You go on and on down the list. But this headline was incredible, but it shouldn't be surprising. By the way, Billy Napier, I think this has been a tactical mistake with him from the beginning. This was a guy who came from Louisiana. He's about culture. He's about building. He's about relationships. He's about this. And from day one, all he's been doing is whining about NIL money. It's like, dude, it's a huge part. Don't get me wrong. I'm not saying NIL does not matter in recruiting, but I think he's gotten too far away from who he is and what he's about. And I think you just see it on the field. There's just a complete disconnect. The program is a mess. That recruiting class went from 3rd nationally to 15th by signing day. You hemorrhage recruits. You hemorrhage transfers. Florida fans don't need to hear this. But boy, oh boy, oh boy, they're having trouble raising NIL money. I'll tell you what. Let's say Billy Napier gets fired, and let's say there's an amazing candidate that they get. I don't even know who that would be. I guarantee you they won't have any trouble raising money. I think this is a reflection of the head coach.